Welcome to the Defining Moments Black Men series of the Authentic Joe Show. I'm Jolena Johnson, your host, and it's my pleasure to welcome Mr. James Ingram. How are you today?
In the spirit of Black History Month, I am blacknificent and blacktastic.
All right. I love it. Okay, well, James, can you tell us a little about yourself, your occupation, and your background?
Well, I'm a native of East St. Louis, Illinois, proud native of East St. Louis, Illinois, attended the public schools here. I'm also an alumnus of Boston University, and I've held a number of positions. I've had more than my 5 career changes. I've worked in the non-for-profit sector. I've worked in corporate America. I've worked in politics. But for the purposes of this particular interview, I am a columnist for the award-winning St. Louis American newspaper.
Yes, and is that America's now longest
number one Black weekly publication in the country, and the number one weekly publication in the state of Missouri.
That is fantastic. Thank you. We appreciate the St. Louis American so much. Okay, so how would you describe yourself?
In a word, I would probably describe myself as being an agitator. So, I know that perhaps you have young people who watch your cast, and they don't know what an agitator is. But the agitator is a thing in that washer that beats the dirt out of the laundry. It agitates. It goes round and around and beats the dirt out. And I use that term because it reminds me of a story. I went to the D.C. area, and I had the privilege of touring the former home of Frederick Douglass. So they show this video clip at the end of the tour, and it recounts a story where he was at the end of his life, and there was a young Black journalist who stopped him for an interview and asked him, he said, Mr. Douglass, I know you're busy, but, what advice would you give to a young aspiring journalist, like myself? So he kind of, paused, thoughtfully and turned back to him and said, agitate.
Agitate. I love it. I love it.
So I've kind of taken on that spirit and that mission in terms of what I write. I tend to write a lot about politicians and political issues and things that have a controversial nature to them. Mm-hmm. So I've just taken on that task of agitating that. There are a lot of things that need to be brought to the surface, and a lot of times individuals aren't willing to be forthcoming and forthright with the people who support them. So that is what I consider myself as being an agitator. Some of the people who I write about would probably have some expletive-laced words to use to describe some of the stuff I write, but I think agitator is probably the cleanest way.
Okay, so that goes directly into my next question. So if you had to pick a phrase that would be the theme for your life, what would that be?
It would probably be that if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
Very good.
And that's a phrase from Alexander Hamilton. I mean, a lot of people falsely attribute it to Malcolm X because he said it quite often, but that's from Hamilton.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes people will say, well, what is a defining moment? So let me share. A defining moment is a point in life when a pivotal decision must be made, or when an experience fundamentally changes a person. What defining moment would you be willing to share with us today?
Well, I was trying to think of all these happy defining moments and all these other things in which we tend to focus on that in this social media driven society that we live in. But I thought about it, and I said, probably the defining moment that I like to share is probably the moment that I determined that we determined as a family that my mother had Alzheimer's. And just to kind of give you the backstory on that, my parents, prior to my father's death, were married for 59 years in total. Wow. Shortly after, we gave them a surprise 50th anniversary party. And shortly after that, my mother began to deteriorate mentally.
Excuse me. You said 50th or 59th?
50.
Yes. Okay. I just want to make sure. Okay.
On that occasion, we gave them a surprise party.
Mm-hmm.
So after that point, my mother began to, to exhibit typical signs of dementia. She would forget things or repeat herself and, say things over and, in the same conversation. And, did I tell you X, Y, and Z? And you just told me 10 seconds ago.
Mm-hmm.
And, we blew it off as, it's just old age. She had a senior moment, that sort of thing. And then it became more pronounced. And you should understand, my father worked 2 jobs for 38 years. His job was to bring home the pay, and my mother's job was to pay bills. So my mother began to miss payments of bills, pay bills twice, constantly ask my father for money. And I was at the home, visiting them, and my father made the point that, your mother keeps asking me for money for the same bill, but I gave her that money. So it became a combative thing. So I said, we got to look into this. And, I kind of slow walked it. And one day, my mother got lost driving her vehicle. And now you're talking about somebody that took pride in just driving wherever she wanted to go and doing what she wanted to do. And come to find out, she ended up in Hillsboro, Missouri, someplace she'd never been in her life. And she was missing for almost 24 hours.
Oh my goodness.
So all of a sudden, I was a person, I'm the person, I always check in on my parents every day, no matter what, if not visit them. So I called my father just randomly and asked him, what's mama doing? He said, I don't know. I haven't seen her. I said, what do you mean you haven't seen her? And it had been almost 24 hours. I said, so that's something's going on. So all of a sudden, my youngest brother calls and he says, I made it to Pennsylvania. We said, well, what do you mean you made it to Pennsylvania? I made it to Pennsylvania. I said, yeah, so why are you telling us this? Because mama dropped me off at the Metrolink station. I said, well, she's missing since she dropped you off. And it was he had one of those red-eye flights. So he had her to drop him off at some ungodly hour. So she's been missing this entire time. So, I went in panic mode. I'm putting up press releases. I'm putting up missing persons reports. I'm trying to drop them off at the radio station, the TV stations, and all these other things. And then we get eventually a call from the Hillsboro police. And they have my mother. And is she okay? Yes. Okay, so, I got to get directions to get there. We get there. And the officer explained to me that she seemed to be confused. The only way that they found her was she was on the side of the road. Her mistakenly popped her car trunk, and they were on patrol and they found her. So they were feeding her, this sort of thing, picked her up, and come to find out she got lost. And the Metrolink station was literally 2 minutes from the house. So we knew something immediately was wrong. So got there, just happy to see her, got her in the car, and I said, okay, you're not driving anymore, Miss Daisy. We're going to take these keys. So she, are you not taking my keys to my car? So I literally was a back and forth. She's got this control thing still going because she felt like I'm still in charge. I pay the bills. I go where I want to go when I want to go. And I had to literally put a club on her car to keep her from driving.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Oh, yeah. So what she did was she called somebody to come cut the club off the car. And I happened to know the guy. I'm saying, how the hell did the club get cut off the car? So he said, well, your mother called me and she paid me to do it. I said, she's got some issues. I'm going to go buy another club right now. So I had my father to distract her while I went and bought another club, put it back on and said, do not answer the phone if she calls you again. So we had to go get her diagnosed, found out that she had dementia, found out that she had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's some years prior, but she hid the medication, which I found. So, long story short, we went back and forth for a number of years. And it became my mission to try to make my father's life and her life as comfortable as possible. I have 2 siblings that don't live anywhere near here. I have one sibling that kind of lives in the area, the one who she dropped off at the airport. But trying to come up with healthcare options. Someone coming in the house, she got to the point where she didn't want to take a bath.
Mhm.
So someone to bathe her, some place to send her during the day where she could have normal activities to give my father a break so he could have some peace of mind and this sort of thing. I'm not going to go into all of the back and forth I had to go through with the folks in my family, but it created a sense of comfort for my father. I was able to kind of wrestle control of his finances, make sure the bills were paid, that he could save and accumulate some funds and things. And then I just had to go on a mission to make sure the funerals and things were paid for in advance for both of them. Begin to write. Can you imagine? While they're yet alive, I'm writing obituaries. This is the kind of person I am.
I can imagine.
Yeah, I'm writing obituaries in advance. I'm interviewing my father. I found someone to put together a funeral memorial videos, letting my father pick out photos, showing them to him, making sure it met his approval, and putting things in order so that when the time came for them to transition, that it made it a little easier than it normally is. Because I can only imagine what it's like when you're under stress to have to do all of those things. Yeah. So I picked that moment because I have at my church and other places, I've talked to people about what they need to put in place for their parents, things you need to take into account in terms of care for them if they have to go into a facility, this sort of thing. And I did a lot of things right. And I think the only thing that I didn't do right, I'm dealing with some probate stuff right now, that I didn't do was I wasn't aware of this 5-year look back period that they have, that in terms of transferring properties and things of this nature. So had I known that, I would have scored 100 in terms of doing what I did. But you live and you learn. So my mission in that vein is to inform other people that I've encountered about missteps that they don't want to make, things that they need to do that people really, a lot of times, particularly Black folks, don't like to take into consideration. And I'm a person, I can compartmentalize. So I'm able to do it and take the emotions out of it. I eulogized both my grandparents as well as my mother and father, and didn't do the ugly cry and didn't do any of that stuff. But everybody can't do that. I get that. That is a particular gift, for lack of a better word. It's a skill. You have the same emotions that everybody else has, but you learn to compartmentalize and deal with it. So that's it's not a happy thing, but you have to laugh instead of crying sometimes. My mother did a lot of funny things when she had Alzheimer's. She would call me on a regular basis at home and cuss me out about, bring me my blankety blank keys, you blankety blank. If I had your keys, I would bring you your keys. So she would do this sort of thing, and then she would talk about my father really bad, and I had to take him to the Alzheimer's Association for some workshops, so that
he could begin to understand the disease. And
this is a disease. This is not her. I know you've been married to her for almost 59, at this point, almost 57 years at that point. It's not the disease, it's her. And he began to understand and deal with her accordingly.
Yes. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I do want to ask a couple of questions. So when your mom was at the 50-year mark and she got lost, around how old was she?
Oh, probably, let's say in her 70s.
In her 70s? Okay.
Late 70s.
And then once you all found out, how long had it been? You said she had been diagnosed years before. Do you have any clue? Was it 4 or 5?
It probably was almost 6 or 7 years prior to us, her exhibiting signs that were blatant.
So
and I found a medicine bottle with Aricept, which is a drug that they use to treat dementia. And we found it hidden on a windowsill with the date on it. So we said, she got diagnosed a long time ago, but being hard-headed the way she was, she rejected that and hid it so that we would know.
Yes. So James, I want to say thank you for sharing that. And I'm glad as a son you're sharing. A few weeks ago, I actually interviewed my bonus mother, who's married to my father, Kenneth Johnson, and he is in a memory care facility right now in Florida. And so she shared the stories and what people have to do. Some steps work for a while, and then you got to change up. Because as the disease progresses. And so one thing I would say, as you're talking about that paperwork, and then we'll get to a couple other things, the paperwork, if you all don't know, make sure that your loved ones have a beneficiary listed on their bank policies. And if they don't have a beneficiary listed, even if you're the power of attorney, you should put a trust in place while they're still living. Otherwise, things have to go to probate. So there are a lot of things to consider, including prepaid burials or prepaid cremations or those type things if you can do it. I'm speaking from experience. Unfortunately, both of my parents have dementia. And if someone does not know, dementia, it covers many of these diseases. So Parkinson's and things like that, and some of the other things, they are all under dementia. So it may be specifically Alzheimer's, or, they may exhibit sundowner syndromes and things like that. So I would just recommend you guys go and look at the Authentic Joe Show, the dementia. There's one small clip that's 5 minutes, and then there's one that's an hour, very informative with a lot of resources. And so back to you, James. When dealing with seniors, especially, as we get older, our seniors are really older, right? Of a total different generation. So when it comes to communicating with your parents or communicating with the older person about getting things in place, because those old school people don't want to talk about it. They don't want you. They don't want to consider it.
No,
they don't want to do anything. So what are 3 pieces of advice that you would give a son, especially when dealing with, transitory things in their lives, so that they can be a little bit more prepared?
Well, I take it, try to be gentle, try to put yourself in their place, because you're talking about end of life types of issues. And as a culture, particularly when we're dealing with Black people, we've been, taught all sorts of things about, if you talk about this subject, you're wishing them away. And, I want to talk about that. And, I just kept broaching the subject and doing it incrementally with my father, and then explaining the benefits, and then you have to look at who you're talking to, because it's no one size fits all. You need to know the person that you're talking to. And, I just, I approached my father from the perspective of, you've been very responsible. You worked all of these years, 38 years, 2 jobs. You never took off. You never called in sick, and you've always provided. And in this instance, this is what you want to do. And I appeal to him from a selfish standpoint that, look, she's driving you crazy. She's getting up in the middle of the night, and you wake up in the morning and popcorn's all over the floor. She's been popping popcorn and burning popcorn and walking the floor and looking out the window trying to escape, get out of the door. You don't want her to walk off. So we got to put some things in place. I'm going to get her in an adult day care where she goes in, goes on field trips, does crafts, and does these things to keep her occupied during the day. Then guess what? You got 8 hours. You can go to the bank. You can take a walk. You can go up and hang out with the other old Black men at McDonald's and chop it up. Do whatever you want to do. Do all the stuff you can't do while you got to watch her and sleep with one eye open.
Right.
So he said, okay, that's good. I said, then finally got that in place. I said, so if something, God forbid, she has Alzheimer's, there's a short shelf life on most people who have Alzheimer's. I said, so, worst case scenario, she's gonna you go before her. Something needs to be in place so I can take responsibility for what you got to do. You don't pay bills. I need to be able to be the person who is the person responsible for handling your bills. So we'll go down to the bank. I'm not trying to take your money.
Right.
All my name just needs to be on here. So in case you can't get to the bank, you say, go down and get some money for me. I can do it.
Yes.
And I'm and the term is designated payee. That's the term. So I can go down, pull the money out, give it to you. And he started looking, because he was good about going to the bank and watching his pension. So he noticed, after a couple, 3 years, he never took any money out. My money's not missing. It's going where it's supposed to go. I never had this much money before. So he saw that I was being responsible. So I said, okay, we need to put something in place here as far as will. We need to get some things in place in terms of your funerals. So we're gonna do a prepaid plan, pay it off over the next few years. You can pick, what kind of service you want. I'm gonna write your obituary up. You tell me some stories. I'm gonna put it in a list. I'm gonna read it to you. You tell me if I'm missing something. So it became like a project. And then when I got the videos together, I played her video and his video for him, and he approved it. So once that was done, I said, I'm good. I don't care what anybody else thinks about it. He approved it. So I put all of this stuff together, just had it in a box, in a firebox, and had to put those things in place. And I said most things I did correctly because I did do the research and try to get as much in place as possible, and then including a hospice service for my mother in eventuality that she needed. So I was able to get a lot of free resources through the Visiting Nurses Association and some other things, and it just made his life so much easier. And although he did pass before she did, the day that he passed, she was able to go immediately into a nursing facility, and for the first month, it was paid entirely by a hospice service that I signed up with. So it's had to do all this research. It really put my life on hold in many respects for 10 years. But I look at the sacrifices that my parents made in order for me to go to a place like Boston University, and even before that, here at home, because there were four of us as siblings, and they made a lot of sacrifices. My two brothers went to Catholic school and high school. So they really sacrificed. So, I felt obligated to do some things and make some decisions. And I always say there's always usually one in the family that does this. Yes. Normally, there's a lot of issues with siblings.
Yes.
Everybody's not going to agree, even if it's the right thing to do. And you've got to have tough skin and be able to tune all that stuff out. You lose some people in terms of relationships, but if you can sleep well at night and know that you did the right thing, that's good.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking this time to share your defining moment. Obviously, your parents did a fantastic job of raising you. It's always insightful to speak with you. And I want to thank you for being an agitator. Thank you for showing us how to be an agitator. And before we close, do you have any final thoughts about Black history?
I think that this is an opportunity every year. First of all, I celebrate Black History Month, but every day is Black History.
That's right.
Month. Every month is Black History Month for me as a Black man, because our history is never, even in 2023, been told in its entirety. I mean, we were more than slaves. We ran empires. We ran. We developed history. We wrote history. We led the world at one point in terms of in military strategy, in terms of culture and civilization. And we need to tell those stories more and more, and understand that a lot of what happened to us caused us to devolve at one point because of slavery. But we led. You can't bring a person to this country and build a country as great as America with people with no skill set, with no intellect. We were brought here, and we were highly evolved in terms of what we were able to do and achieve. So I always admonish young people: read your history, know your history. Don't allow someone else to define you. Define yourself, since we're talking about defining moments. And if you know your history, no one can bamboozle you and hoodwink you into thinking that the best thing you ever were was a slave, and they did you a favor by bringing you here.
Very good. Well, on that note, thank you so much, Mr. Ingram, for sharing your wisdom. And I look forward to seeing you again on the Authentic Joe Show. Take good care.
My pleasure. You as well.
Thank you.